What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? Today, we have a fellow creator, somebody I'm a big fan of, was actually following him a long time before he even knew I existed. So one of the very first people I followed on TikTok, his name is James Killen, and he used to be a conservative, and now he's intelligent. And
wow, you're getting right into it.
Getting right into it.
Like,
That's
2
fair.
minutes.
But no, he had a really compelling just series. I don't even know if you want to call it a series on TikTok. That just kind of explained where he started out at, where he is now, and how he got there, and was doing it in a pretty genuine manner that it really resonated with me, and I think it's resonated with a lot of people. So just tell us about yourself. Tell us where you're from. Tell us, kind of how you got from where you are from where you were to where you are. Let's just jump right into it.
Yeah, sounds good. My name is James Killen. Born in Kentucky, raised in a military family. And as you can imagine, raised in a military family, raised in a very conservative family.
Especially in Kentucky.
Right, exactly. In a conservative part of Kentucky. So I was born on Fort Knox, so that was pretty much home for me. I moved around quite a bit, but that was it. And so from the time that I was old enough to understand what politics was until I was well into my 30s, I was a conservative, voted for my first Democrat for Kentucky governor in 2016. So before that, the idea of even voting for a Democrat was, I don't know, foreign to me.
Oh, so you're reformed as of 2016. That was
I wouldn't say that I was reformed by then. It was just a lack of choices.
Right. I saw.
Yeah.
Didn't you also vote for Gary Johnson?
I did. I voted for Gary Johnson in
See?
2016 because
I'm not alone.
Well,
it wasn't not a great thing we ever did, but
Yeah.
it
Well,
happened.
there's absolutely no way I can vote for someone who openly admits to sexual assault.
yeah.
I mean, I didn't like
Right.
Donald Trump to begin with. I always thought
No,
he was
yeah.
a blowhard. The idea that he got the nomination blew my mind.
Right.
But also, I was raised to think Hillary Clinton was the devil incarnate. I mean,
Mhm.
so the idea of voting for her or Donald Trump, I was like, Gary Johnson might not be the sharpest spoon in the crayon box, but at the same time, he's not a sexual predator and an actual predator as far as what I
Right.
thought of Hillary Clinton at the time.
Mhm.
Because, oh man, to tell you what I've heard of Hillary Clinton through conservative media from mid 90s until the mid teens, if you will.
Mhm.
Literally, the idea that she drank the blood of children would not have surprised me back
Yeah.
then. Now, granted, I've realized how ridiculous that is, and I'm a little bit of hyperbole, but
Right. No, it's
yeah.
a real thing that
But I
people
mean,
think
yeah,
and say all the time. So
it's not hyperbole though, because a guy literally tried to shoot up a pizzeria because he thought
Right.
that Hillary Clinton had kids held in the basement,
Right.
and
And
it was a
people
slab-on-grade pizzeria.
yeah, people still think that, and there's no basement.
Right.
Forgive me yelling. I can hear myself through there.
No, I
No.
understand the frustration
Just
for sure.
and that's and for us who are never quite, I've definitely gotten more liberal as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
More progressive as I've gotten older, I should say. Liberal's almost a dirty word these days, but
It is dirty.
I was never conservative. I had some maybe more. I spent a good part of my childhood in South Florida, and as a result of that, I felt like a minority because it's a very heavily, predominantly Cuban community and everything like that. And I remember getting asked, coming from Minnesota to going down there and getting asked why I don't learn Spanish. And, my teenage and younger self-reaction was like, why the fuck don't you learn English? You're in my country type of thing. And so I had a little bit more conservative views on things like immigration and stuff that I've definitely moved to the left on. But I've never been a conservative. I remember staying up till 2 in the morning, just hoping that the George Bush election results were going to turn around at some point, watching that. And so for people like us who we were never that far to the right, trying to understand, like, grasp that mentality that you hear these ridiculous things and on its face, like, I don't even have to fact check this. I know it's absolutely lunacy. It's lunacy. I don't know how far you were into it on that, but like how it's hard for us to wrap our head around how somebody else can be like, yeah, I get that. But I see it all the time, even today on social media, where satire sites that say they're satire sites and put that this is satire somewhere in a meme will say something like, AOC thinks that we should do a trip to the sun at night because and like stuff like that, and they eat it up and they believe it and they share it as if it's real. And it's like, to me, I'd see something, if they said Donald Trump said that, I would be fact checking it, and he's the only idiot. Him and MTG or Boebert are the only people in Washington I could even picture saying something that stupid, and I would still be fact checking it because it's that ridiculous. And I don't know. I'm getting run away here, but can you walk me through how that?
I'm dying over here because you just hit the nail so square on the head. I'm going to ask, have you ever been a construction worker? The problem is the conservative media makes it boils down to a cult. Like, they beat into your head that you cannot listen to a thing Democrats, liberals, or progressives say, and that communism and socialism thing is always in there. It's always they're socialists. They hate America. Anything that they say is always a lie. You have to listen to us. We'll tell you the truth. And you just get into this, and it is an echo chamber. And I know that's a buzzword at this point, but all you hear, like, I have a stack. I wish I would have brought him over here. I have a stack of books from Glenn Beck and Mark Levin and all of these, even Dinesh D'Souza, for the love of Pete, as embarrassed as I am to say it. Larry, I've got a book upstairs by Larry Elder, and I keep these. Not, I've always had the idea of burning at least Atlas Shrugged, but just for TikTok purposes, I don't want to burn books or anything, but the irony, I figure, would be a fun thing to deal with. But you end up in this echo chamber to where that stuff eventually makes sense to you, and then all you're doing is looking for ways, confirmation bias. You're looking for ways to reinforce that, and you're ignoring everything else. You ignore CNN, you ignore MSNBC. I mean, even when The Hill, which I don't think anybody is going to argue is a liberal resource, even when they defend a Democrat, all
people
of a
start
sudden,
arguing they're a liberal resource.
right, exactly. People start arguing they're a list. So anything that even seems like it's liberal, left, or progressive, and God forbid anything that has a D next to it, you're automatically conditioned to ignore all of that. And the second anybody pushes back, you've got this constant drum of talking points that you can spit back at people. You don't actually have to understand it. You just have this superficial,
regurgitate it.
yeah, exactly. You have a superficial understanding of what's going on. I remember right when President Obama was really picking up in the polls against Hillary Clinton back in 07 and 08. Noam Chomsky. I was introduced to who Noam Chomsky was, and Noam Chomsky was introduced to me as Beelzebub, if you will. I mean, just again, a product of the devil, and if you speak his name 3 times in a mirror, you're probably going to go to some utopian Democrat hellscape, and you're never going to be able to escape. And it wasn't until 2021 that I actually listened to some of what Noam Chomsky had to say, and absolutely blown away by the man's intellect. I mean,
I hate to see him do Noam dirty like that.
Yeah, I know. Now, I would much rather read Noam Chomsky than listen to him speak because, in an oral format, if you will, he is the driest person in the world to listen to. I've
Nobody
never
has it all, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that, I think, also is because he's thinking the entire time that he's talking. And of course he's he's in his 90s now, but
Yeah, he's an old
at,
dude.
but manufacturing consent.
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I've been in comms for 12, 13 years now. It's an amazing book, and people on the conservative side, the idea of reading that, you might as well be
I think we could
a
just stop you with
yeah,
the idea of reading.
the if it's not Glenn Beck, it's not being read. Yeah, you're not wrong, brother. You're really not. Um, and I was in college, getting my degree in law and public policy. I wanted to be an attorney, and I wanted to write policy for the Heritage Foundation. That's the exact reason why I
Wow.
got my degree in law and public policy, was so that I could go be an attorney and I could write policy for the Heritage Foundation. That was the
That's
purpose.
a
That's a
Yeah.
interesting goal to have in life.
Yeah. Right. But that's
I
how
mean,
far
yeah,
right I
Right.
was.
So
sure.
actually, so some questions on that. First of all, were you yourself in the military?
Oh yeah. I did, between active duty. I did active duty for 5 years, and then I was in the Guard for another, depending on how you look at it, 12 or 13.
And
Uh,
so what did you do in the military?
I was a helicopter mechanic when I first went in, 6152 with the United States Marine Corps. The helicopter's retired now, but it's called a CH-46, or most people are more familiar with the CH-47, the Army Chinook.
Mm-hmm.
The CH-46 is kind of its little brother.
Okay.
So it's
Still a
still
twin rotor. Yep.
tandem rotor helicopter, but the 46 is a medium lift. The 47 is a heavy lift.
Okay.
So I started out there. Ops tempo way too high, for me to get my degree. So I got out to pursue my education. I did want to go back in as an officer in the Marine Corps, but in April of 2012, I finished my degree in May of 2011, got into the officer pipeline for the Marine Corps, which takes forever. And in
Mm-hmm.
April of 2012, ended up having gallbladder surgery, and I just couldn't become competitive again. So picked up a slot with the Kentucky Air National Guard and became a public affairs officer with them. And then I did that until 2019. Had my own business. There was no way I could deploy. I was basically useless to the organization in that regard. And there was a major that was coming in, needed a slot, and I said, you know what, this is the end of my military career for me. So, all pragmatic decisions to be made there. But I love the military. Always did love the military. Owe a lot to the Kentucky Air National Guard and the Marine Corps, even though they kind of screwed up my brain housing group a little bit. Um, Still dealing with that. But beyond that, yeah. And I've lost. I can't tell you how many friends, even my Marines, guys that I did, 2 tours with, and would literally die for, and won't
Mm-hmm.
speak to me at all.
Because
Two
of
of them,
your
yep,
because
because of
you've
my
changed your
transition.
ideals.
Yeah, yep,
Wow.
because Donald Trump is king, and the idea that I don't support him, I've turned my back on America, and I'm like, dude, let's if we could
Well,
have a back and forth real fast, and
uh-huh.
just
See,
don't want to listen.
and that's something and I'm sure that this has a lot to do with me being a little bit in my own echo chamber, just because obviously I'm fairly publicly progressive and everything.
No.
And so I interact with a fair amount of veterans who, have similar views to you today, maybe always have. And I was wondering how pervasive it really was. I mean, obviously I know plenty of more conservative veterans too, but like I have friends who are more conservative veterans, and we're still friends. It's just we just don't talk about politics when we're around each other, because there was a time in American history when you could be friends with people who didn't agree with you wholeheartedly on how much they wanted to blow Donald Trump, and you could still be friends. You just go do things you enjoy together that don't involve politics, and do those things. So um I guess maybe my own perspective is a little more maybe I had higher hopes that more veterans service members at least had a more balanced perspective of the political situation when the leader of the free world tries to make it not the free world anymore.
Yeah, I
you
would
would think.
say from my experience, I was only like in the guard through Obama's presidency, and I basically left at the beginning of 2017. So really, there was very little Trump carryover, but they were very critical. And every weird thing that you would think of that people's conservatives would say about Obama is exactly what they would say every time we saw them. There's always a little bit of politics that comes into that, or just chatting. And even in Minnesota, this is the Minnesota National Guard, and still.
So you had the same experience. It was much more heavily conservative. You felt.
Oh my gosh!
Okay.
When I joined, I called myself fiscally conservative and socially liberal, and I still didn't fit in all that well.
Yeah, no,
Right.
and that right there, that was my midpoint between being literally a far right, about to join a militia conservative, to where I am now. My midpoint was I'm a fiscal conservative. I just want a balanced budget amendment, and this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah, shit
But of
like
course, if once you get out of your echo chamber and you realize, a
There's no
sovereign
such thing
fiat
as a fiscal
currency.
conservative.
Right. There's no such thing as fiscal. There's somebody who doesn't like social programs, and uses I'm a fiscal conservative. I want a balanced budget, as the cover for I don't want to give poor people money because all they need to do is pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what. And I mean, you can back me up on this one. That's really what you're thinking when you call yourself a fiscal conservative. Is
Fuck them poor people.
yeah, fuck them poor people. And I had I had exposure to social liberalism. I had a cousin who I loved dearly, and her wife Linda, who should have been her wife anyway, her partner Linda, they absolutely should have had the ability to be married, but back then I couldn't go as far as married. Civil union, I was like,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
Domestic
yeah,
partnership.
exactly. Because I was also raised Catholic, so there's that aspect of
Catholic
it
in
as well.
Kentucky.
Yeah, yeah, and as a matter of fact,
That's
you can trace my lineage on my grandmother's side all the way back to one of the first priests in Kentucky County, Virginia, back in the 1700s. Yep, the name Durbin. So, yeah.
wow.
Catholic ginger in Kentucky. How did that
Yeah,
go for ya?
my dating prospects were minimal. No, yeah, so I had to get my own personality. But
Sorry. So you went. So then you went to college.
Yep.
And now college is where people go to become indoctrinated into liberalism.
Right.
So did your views start to change in college at all?
Polls 495, Dr. Charles Ziegler, the dean of the political science department back then at the University of Louisville, and anybody can fact check me if they want to. I don't know if he's still there, but Polls 495 was my senior thesis. I wrote a paper on democratization in post-communist Eastern Europe with a comparative analysis of Slovenia, Romania, and Belarus, and how their switch from democracy or to democracy after the fall of the Soviet Union. I did very, very well in that class and still ended with an 89.4. And I ended with an 89.4, getting like a 97 on my final paper and a 99 on the final exam, because I argued with Dr. Ziegler on a regular basis. But I was working full time. I had 3 children, and I was full time in college. And the course was only a Monday, from like 6 to 9 or 6 to 9:30. So I'd missed a couple. He used those days that I missed to lower my grade to an 89.4 because he refused to give me an A. And that was my final class in college. So, no, the Liberal Indoctrination Center, that is the University of Louisville, did not have quite the effect on my views as most conservatives would have you believe.
Yeah.
I
Sure.
did get exposed to a lot of information, but it was the hypocrisy with people like Sean Hannity and Glenn Beck and all these
Old Tucky
conservative
Tuck.
blowhards, right? Well, Tucker Carlson wasn't. I think he was still on headline news back then, or
Mm,
somewhere in that ballpark. So he wasn't quite as prominent as he is today. But
Mhm.
yes, I did
Or
watch
was
Tucker
rather.
Carlson while he was on. Yeah, while he was on headline news. But it was quite literally the hypocrisy when Barack Obama took office that really started getting me questioning the conservative media and the bias that I was being fed. It's
mm-hmm,
still, if you go back, I've left them up on my Facebook page. Um, you can go back and see. I started doing videos back in 2014, 2015 when Facebook started letting you do that.
mm-hmm,
And man, I'm railing against minimum wage increases, saying minimum wage, minimum skill. You shouldn't be trying to
mm-hmm.
raise a family on minimum wage.
We
Just
agree.
not.
You shouldn't
Yeah,
be.
yeah. You shouldn't be. But the problem is that minimum wage hasn't kept up with productivity
No.
at all. And I
Right.
just had a buddy of mine who's a little bit more conservative than I am, still progressive, but a little bit more conservative than I am. And we had a discussion about minimum wage increase. And of course, he's a small business owner. So the idea of the government saying you have to pay this much. I used to
Mm-hmm,
do marketing and advertising for small businesses. I understand that some of them are
mm-hmm,
barely getting by themselves. So paying, somebody $27 an hour, probably not exactly feasible when they barely make 30.
mm-hmm,
So I get that, but at the same time, if we didn't have a minimum wage, there are so many businesses out here, so many of the Jeff Bezoses in the world. Even
mm-hmm,
though he was one of the first ones to across the board raise to $15 an hour, if they could get away with it,
mm-hmm.
from a social or governmental standpoint, would literally force people to pay them to be able to work.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
they indentured servitude would, they'd be all about it.
Well, and
Um,
even from a small business aspect, I've I've long said that, if you can't afford to pay somebody a living wage, you can't afford to be in business. Like you don't get to be like, well, I can't afford my rent, therefore I should be allowed to pay less, or I can't afford materials to make my product, or I can't afford fuel to drive my vehicles, therefore I should get to pay less for all of that stuff. I mean, it's just a cost of doing business, and we look at it different. Like it's somehow negotiable because it's people, which is ridiculous,
Right. Labor is
and
a
man, you and
input
I,
cost
Yeah.
we
for
would have been
doing
in
business.
such an argument 10 years ago, man. We would have been. Now we can debate at least, from a socioeconomic standpoint of the practicality and what wage you can
Mm-hmm.
get by paying at the moment. We could not have had that discussion 10 years ago. You and I would not have been able to have that discussion because
Right.
I would have
And
been dead set in the dogma, dead set in it.
mm-hmm. And that I think is what's frustrating to a lot of people on the left, which you are obviously well aware of now, is like I'm I see your point, what you're trying to say, and it's like, here's just some extra information I would like you to receive. I'm not even saying you have to agree with it, just understand that this is another aspect you should consider when forming opinions on this topic.
Oh,
And
they're all
they're
lies, Jordan.
all liberal dogma. And yeah, and that's what's frustrating. Also, I would be here's the other thing. It'd be like, fine, I'm all for getting rid of minimum wage if we have widespread unions negotiating for every industry, what that industry is going to pay their workers. Or, then let the free market figure it out and let the people negotiate because that's all their things. Well, if you're not getting paid enough, quit and go find a better job. Right? They say that
Yeah,
all the
because that
time.
works. That's yeah.
Well, but it does work if you have a collective bargaining group where you can say, all right, this is what you're going to pay. And if you're not going to pay, the union isn't going to endorse you. And you have to have these binding contracts. I mean, that's the way that a bunch of Scandinavian countries do it. They have no minimum wage. And it's the unions that but you got, 70, 80, 90% union participation in the workforce, and the unions just go to these different industries, and for that industry they negotiate the minimum wage for their people, and it's way higher than our minimum wage. So I would love that, but then you talk about unions, and conservatives have all kinds of feelings about those too.
It just
Damn
sounds like
communists,
socialism,
Gordon.
man.
They're communists.
That's right.
That's
That's
socialism.
right.
They're communists. Oh man, I thrown around the word communist and socialist like I
Yeah.
don't like a toddler throws toys. I mean,
Right.
just if you say anything that involves the government stepping in to do anything, or a union or some type of worker collective,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden we are transferring the production powers to the people, and we're no longer, which that's a funny thing too, and this is why I'm struggling to say this, because
Mm-hmm.
it's completely ass backwards. Is you've got conservatives swearing to all get out that we're trying to turn the United States into socialism or communism, but they want the government out of everything, out of everything, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you do realize that socialism and communism is the people owning the right of production,
Mm-hmm.
but at
Communism has
no,
no central
yeah,
government.
exactly, and at no point has the United States government made any indication that it has any desire to own the powers of production. If anything, we are allowing crony capitalism to run an absolute muck,
Mm-hmm.
and people are trying to rein that in, and rather than help rein that in, because one day, and this is another thing that conservatives love to think, is that every single conservative at some point in their life is going to be a billionaire, and they don't want you touching their money. And it's like, I hate to tell you this, I want to be a billionaire too, or wanted to be a billionaire too. Um,
Right.
it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Right.
You
Well,
weren't given $300,000 by your parents, and then floated until you could get, Amazon off the ground.
And even if it does happen, and heaven forbid you become 100 millionaire because you get some. I mean, I know it's going to be tough to figure out how to get by, but it's yeah.
Yeah,
And they'll always tell you, back when America was great, and I've had this argument because I will stand for FDR. I know he's done some shitty things. But one of our greatest presidents,
well,
I
nobody's
think,
perfect.
objectively, one of our greatest
communist.
presidents.
Yeah. He
And
still
and
didn't. You go ahead.
and conservatives, they all the time in my comments will come and be like, it wasn't FDR's policies that got us out of the Great Depression and
was
gave us the
World War
greatest
II.
economy the world's ever seen. It was World War II. It's like, okay, but who was president during World War II then? I'm like, FDR. And
Hey,
so
Truman
who was
wrapped up the last couple months.
who was who was who was coming up with the wartime policies during the Second World War? And it was FDR. And you want to know what those wartime policies looked like? The government told all of the companies that they were going to make this, they were going to pay workers this much, they were going to produce this much. They told all of the people in the country, you are going to get vouchers where you're only allowed to buy so much sugar, so much gasoline, so much meat, so much everything. It was as close to a planned economy as I think the world has ever seen. So it's either the New Deal policies were the ones which were, a little less capitalist than the hellscape they were living in before, or it was full on as close to communism as we've ever been if it was the war that got us out of it. You got to pick one, and
Man,
and they usually don't have.
Well,
no
and even
answer
to
for
show
that.
you like how unsocialist we want to be as a government.
Mhm.
FDR, who some might argue has led us more down the path of socialism than any other president,
Mhm.
he decided to not nationalize the banking industry
Mhm.
when he basically had to, on paper, nationalize it in order to make sure that it didn't completely crash.
Mhm.
He gave it back to
Yeah.
private investors. So we did for a very short time have a nationalized banking system,
Mhm.
and then within a year we're like, yep, we're going to give it back to the people who kind of fucked us over in the 20s.
And then we did that all over again.
Right. Obviously, yeah,
in the
continue
2010s.
to
Well, and on top of that, I mean, it's frustrating, but FDR's social programs, New Deal programs, all of the evil socialism was the compromise, because it was either that or it was going to be full socialism. I mean, the economy had collapsed at that point, and that was the compromise to maintain capitalism. I mean, if we really want to look at it, FDR had the opportunity to do a lot more than he did, and didn't, to preserve capitalism, which has turned out great for us. So,
And could you imagine if we were not on the gold standard after the crash, which we probably wouldn't have had the crash in 29 regardless, but if FDR wasn't restricted by the money supply, what would have happened? Which, I mean, great thought experiment as far as it goes. I mean, the social programs would have went a hell of a lot further, and we're only learning today. Now, granted, we have had an issue with inflation, but one can trace that back to record corporate profits and that game of hungry hippos. The government dumps
quantitative easing and bullshit like that.
Yeah, you can't dump $4 trillion in the economy and not expect businesses to gobble up every dollar that they possibly could.
Right. And I mean, the laws of supply and demand, no matter what economic system you operate under, still exist. And if you dump a bunch of money supply without decreasing the demand, you're going to end up with inflation, because everybody's just going to spend more for the same things that they were coming on. And obviously, like, that's one of my issues with UBI, which we probably won't get into today because that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But again,
fun one.
Yeah. But anyway, so back, I guess, on the topic, or what were you gonna say?
No, we should just have Kathy on for UBI.
We should have Kathy on for UBI. She agrees with me, though. So,
well, that's okay. I'll be the layman guy.
You'll be the dissenting.
Who knows nothing that's actually relevant.
But anyway, So when did your change? Your change came because the hypocrisy that you started witnessing the hypocrisy, the thanks Obama for every time somebody had stubbed their toe,
right?
So that started coming around 2016. When did you really kind of lean into it and decide that you were going to start screaming into the void of the internet and see what it got you?
The Black Lives Matter rallies.
Really?
Because, and don't end the podcast because I am going to finish this statement. Okay. I promise. Don't hang up on me, because I don't want this to be the end of where we leave it. I posted a meme on my Facebook that said "All Lives Matter" during the Black Lives Matter rally, and that is when Princess Ndidi reached out to me. For those of you, we were talking before this. So Ndidi,
so this is your lesbian friend who you had. We were talking a little bit. Sorry, context for the listeners. We were talking a little bit before we got started, and you were saying it was one of the few socially liberal situations that you'd been exposed to. They're good friends of yours. Happened to be a LGBTQ couple.
Oh no, that was family. And Ndidi is straight, if you will.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my bad.
She reached out to me over that meme, and I was talking to her on the phone, and my middle daughter, who is probably the most politically savvy of my daughters, she started hitting back at me, and we had pretty in-depth conversation between that. But between her and Ndidi, like they hit me from both sides on this, and I've always taught my daughters that that you can challenge me, you can challenge anything you want to challenge. And my daughter's been smarter than me since they were about 5 too, so that's helpful. My daughters are very intelligent young ladies, but my middle is not afraid of me at all.
Sure.
So basically, she's hitting me from one side, and Dee Dee's hitting me from the other, and then of course we somehow ended up with all three of us on speakerphone, talking back and forth, and they finally opened my eyes, and I'll tell you the story that Ndidi told me this was, every major shift in someone's thinking has to have a significant emotional event tied to it. It just has to, yeah. So, and Dee Dee's brother lived with her, and they live in Washington D.C. And she said, James, when your daughters leave the house, do you worry about them? I said, of course, they're my daughters, when
Mhm.
they leave the house. She said, have you ever worried about them because of their skin color? And I said, thoughts never crossed my mind to worry about my daughters because of their skin color. And she said, not only do I worry about my brother every time that he leaves, I have to worry about him just because of the way he looks. I
Mm-hmm.
just have to worry about him because of the color of his skin. And it really it just gave me a cold chill just thinking about it right now.
No,
The
Right.
the idea that someone leaves the house in the United States of America and their loved ones are worried about them, especially because in this case he is a young black male,
mm-hmm.
is disgusting to me. And I worry about my daughters because they're young ladies, and
Mm-hmm.
they're petite, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm 6'2", 215. They didn't make that cut. They they didn't get there. So I worry about them for that reason. Um, and I mean, imagine if in Dee Dee's brother was her little sister. Now, not only
Mm-hmm.
she's worried about her because she's a young lady, but she also has to worry about her because of her skin color. And
No.
it just it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I started looking at that differently. I started looking at the Black Lives Matter rallies differently. I started looking at racism in the United States because, I would have told you even 5 years ago that racism in the United States didn't exist. I would have told you 5 years ago it didn't exist because I didn't want it to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a
Mm-hmm.
big problem with conservatives is a lot of people want to think, I don't want to think that I'm where I am because I'm white.
Right.
Mhm.
That's the last thing I don't want to think because I know how hard I've worked in my life.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want
Mm-hmm.
to think that I've had a leg up because that diminishes my ego and how I feel about
Mm-hmm.
the hard work that I've put in. So, not even willing to listen to the idea that racism exists because now you're diminishing my hard work. And the
Mm-hmm.
fact of the matter is that it does exist, and people like Indeedy's brother have to work twice as hard
Mm-hmm.
just to get. And I'm going to say this, and I hope that it's kept in context. Just to make sure that whoever's hiring him doesn't think he's a thug, for lack of better
Right.
words,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't think that automatically because of his skin color, he's a person they have to worry about. That makes me it makes me sick to my stomach even having to say it
No.
out
Right.
loud. And the idea uh, that I'm sitting here worried about my ego when that's happening on a
Mm-hmm.
daily basis to
Right. To
millions of people.
millions.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It started a snowball, and then we get into January 6th, and those two things were so close together. January 6th was another significant emotional event for me because not only did I used to live in Washington D.C., um, I the United States government is
Right.
as sacrosanct as you can get for me without
Mm-hmm.
being religious.
I mean, well, you took an
And
oath to
yeah,
protect
right,
the government
right,
and the Constitution, right?
exactly. And I didn't swear an oath to a president. I
Mm-hmm.
swore an oath to the Constitution, and to hear how butchered it has been over the last couple years is absolutely insane to me. But those two things happening so close together, I started running as fast as I could away from conservatism and republicanism. Now, I won't tell you that I'm a Democrat. I am a registered independent now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I will tell you that I am a person who sees the United States as both great and deeply flawed at the exact same time. And having that conversation with the buddy that I was just mentioning a few minutes ago, kind of when was the United States ever great? And
Mm-hmm.
conversation, and he said, we're the greatness in the United States is the fact that we're always trying to improve. And if you kind of look at the chart with the stock market, we
Yep.
have our ebbs and flows.
Mm-hmm.
We have our times where we regress.
Mm-hmm.
Now seems to be one of those times. So I could agree with him that the greatness in the United States is the fact that we do try to improve. Are we in a pretty big slump at the moment? Yeah, I think Donald
The
Trump has brought
irony
out,
of that
yes,
slump
yeah,
being the banner of "Make America Great Again," if that's the the
yeah,
banner he's
yeah.
flying under,
Yeah,
is
and make America great again just means bring back 1955 when I could say the N word and somebody else had to drink from a different water fountain. That's effectively
yeah.
what it sounds like to me.
But we
And
don't want
he
those
and
tax rates back.
right, yeah, we don't want the don't bring the 90% marginal tax rate back. But this flag that's on this shirt right here, if I see somebody flying an American flag on their vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
um, nowadays I'm automatically going. I can imagine who that person is right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which
And that is horrible because
is
I've fought
heartbreaking.
underneath
Yeah.
this flag.
Mm-hmm. It,
It's yeah.
it is something too, because I never served in the military. My experience and perspective is obviously much different and a lot less relevant in that sense than yours and yours. But I again, I don't want to say moving more to the left has made me less patriotic necessarily, but I used to feel a lot of, I used to really buy into American exceptionalism. I used to feel you see the flag, you get that swell of pride for the national anthem and all of that bullshit. And I think that coming away from that a little bit is healthy. But I've almost swung to the opposite side where now it's like I enjoy going to do a lot of rural things that are, frequented by a lot of conservative people, and like rodeo and stuff, and they really ham it up, and it's like you don't even want to like it makes you almost feel gross. You don't want to stand for it. You don't. It's like, yeah, I get not wanting to stand for the flag now. I get not wanting to say the Pledge of Allegiance or sing the national anthem or whatever it is, because I associate this with the most like that's not patriotism. That's nationalism. And I love this country, but I feel like the people who have co-opted patriotism and co-opted the symbols of this country represent everything that's the antithesis to what we pretend this country is about, and it hurts. I mean, it's genuinely depressing. It makes me feel very upset and sad that that's the way that I feel when I know how I used to feel about it. And like I said, there's a little bit of middle ground there where you probably shouldn't be gung ho, unquestioning, praise the flag type of thing, but you should feel pride in your country, and because of those people that have the flag on their truck and try to tie that to their politics, it's gone. It doesn't feel like, I don't feel that those symbols represent the nation that I love, and I try to do something a little bit, whatever little bit I can do to make a better place for everybody who lives here. And that, I think, is really what tears that apart, is that it's the people who have co-opted it want to make it a place for them and only them. And I want it to be a better place for them, even though I disagree with them, and for all of the other people who are not like me. And that's what patriotism is, and not whatever the fuck they've turned it into.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think you hit it on the head. I think as much as I want, like, my initial reaction to, personally, if I see somebody wear like anything that's like the flag, like garb, that's just like you got a blazer or like underwear or like
Mm-hmm.
it's so dumb. And the people that do that, like you said, they're co-opting the American symbol for, mostly what it is like it ends up being consumerism, which I guess you could say
the most American thing
is
ever.
the most American thing ever. So maybe I'm I'm in the wrong here. But the people that do that, I almost don't blame them, because they don't really know like the history of what America has done to its own indigenous people, to indigenous people around the world, and to democracies around the world,
African
Americans. It's like this mind control thing, and I know what it is. It's corporate capital control over our education system from the beginning of time to even into most of colleges. So personally, like, I was a big fan of America, and when I was looking at like kneeling at football games, right away I was like, why would you do that? Looked into it a little bit, and it's like, okay, like protesting like police brutality against a specific group of people that you're a part of, I can understand that. Like, even like that seems like a fair way to protest. You're literally not disrupting anybody.
Yeah.
You're just expressing your patriotism in a way that you feel is appropriate, considering your circumstances. But the more I learned, and the more I have grown and learned about history and moved further to left, mostly because of just like the horrific shit that America has allowed to be pervade beyond our borders and within our borders, that we don't talk about at all in our education system or in our country. So,
gentlemen, you both have just hit another nail square. American exceptionalism and the American flag is the blanket that conservatives use to protect themselves from everything you've just said. Because you're absolutely right. Our corporate controlled education system, and Kentucky was the first state in the union to accept Common Core or adopt Common Core, created by Bill Gates, of course. But yeah, the teaching history, teaching is an entry level profession, and it should not be. There is absolutely no reason why teaching should be. We don't have entry level doctors. They not only have med school, they've got residency, they all these different things that they've got to do just to be professionals in their field. And we treat teachers like they're glorified babysitters, and try to funnel kids into this nice little standard. Most of the teachers who teach history don't have a full in-depth, and that's not to say all of them by any stretch, because I don't want cannon fodder to jump through this screen to get me, because I think her content is amazing. A lot of teachers don't even understand what they're teaching.
She doesn't primarily teach history, and it's hard for the history teachers to focus on learning history when they've got to coach football. So
fair point. But no, it keeps, to get back to the main point is that American exceptionalism and this guise of patriotism is a blanket, and what's going on right now, and probably the way that the reason that we feel, I think collectively the way that we feel about seeing the American flag being abused the way that it is because right now there's a large group of people trying to rip that blanket off of conservatives, and what they're doing is just clutching it tighter because they're not ready to hear that slavery in the United States didn't end until really the 1940s.
Right.
Because it ended.
Or even really the 60s,
That still technically isn't ended now. If you really want to look at our penal system, we didn't make it illegal. We just changed the rules for it.
The rules. There you go.
Yeah, we changed the definition.
Touche, absolutely touche. But you're talking about people who want to say slavery ended in 1865.
And racism was over forever.
Right. And racism was over, and there was no more as soon as everybody got the right to vote. And I'm like, wait a minute. Was it the 19th Amendment that really gave everybody the right to vote? But so black women were still second-class citizens, third-class, fourth-class, however you want to look at it, until, 1918, my bad.
1920s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 1920s. So
1920s is when women got the right to vote.
Right?
Yeah.
So the numbers are flipping
You
around
know,
in here. Sorry about
but I
that.
mean,
But
segregation didn't end till late
oh
'60s.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
easily.
honestly, it didn't even end then because private
Still
schools were
hasn't
still allowed to
really even
be
happen now. I mean,
right.
But when
Legal segregation, though, you could still legally segregate private schools until the
yeah,
mid '70s,
and Richard
late
Nixon,
'80s or mid '80s.
launching the drug
Mm-hmm.
war for the entire purpose of destroying the inner cities and
Mm-hmm.
and basically the black nuclear family.
And then Ronald Reagan sold them crack.
Right, right. So, but Ronald Reagan is the
allegedly.
greatest president ever.
It's not
Okay,
allegedly.
yeah, but no, they don't want to hear that. I didn't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't want to hear it either. And again, and it's not for some dislike of black people or indigenous people
Mm-hmm.
or of immigrants. It really had to do with my ego and what I thought about myself.
Yep.
Now, for
Well,
some
and
people, it has everything to do with somebody's
Mm-hmm.
skin color or where they came
yeah,
from. I'm not saying that that's not a factor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying that you've got all these different layers of this onion, but that American exceptionalism, that borderline jingoism, if you don't want to, I mean, it basically is jingoism, where they're
Mm-hmm.
just clutching that blanket and they do not want to let go of it, because as soon as they let go of it, you're gonna expose them to the elements that is the real history of the United States, and they're not ready for that.
right. And isn't that like in its own self? That's the white privilege that white Americans get, to not have to consider, what was it like to be a
Mm-hmm.
black person as a slave, or
Mm-hmm.
post official slavery, post Civil War, and then being black in America, and being denied the right to vote, because a bunch of white people didn't want you to, and made it
Mm-hmm.
extremely difficult and threatened to kill you if you did try to vote. Like that type of, just not even acknowledging that ever happened.
Right.
That is,
Mm-hmm.
that's white privilege if I've ever heard it.
Or
Yeah.
that you were allowed to be paid less because of your skin color, or you couldn't buy a house in this particular neighborhood because of
Right.
your skin color.
The list goes on and on.
And it's just endless. And then the fact that these people can't understand that we built the structure of our legal system and the way that our country operates on from its foundation. I mean, the reason that we wrote the Constitution the way we did, and
Three-fifths of a person.
number of the amendments that we had were set up to protect the institution of slavery, and then were set up to protect the institution of or just segregation in general, and our legal system. I mean, the black codes, the loitering laws, the vagrancy laws that they used to just take newly freed slaves and put them in prison so they could put them back on the plantations, leased from the prison, back into the slavery that they had just escaped. All of this, our entire system was built on that structure, on that foundation. And just to say that we changed something, we passed affirmative action, or we gave them the right to vote, or something that undoes all of that structure that was built to support these things, it's just lunacy to try to make that argument. And that's what always frustrates me, is you can acknowledge that we built our country on slavery. You can acknowledge that we had segregation and a whole host of laws to support that segregation and to support these judicial systems that were aimed at these people. And then you think that you pass one law, or we make one step in the right direction, and all of that just no longer affects how society is, and all of that history and that lack of generational wealth that these people weren't allowed to accumulate, and all of that.
And that's just one small piece of the pie.
Yeah.
That doesn't even consider the widespread oppression of the ruling class to the poorest of our country.
Yeah.
From the foundation of our country, of them not even being allowed to vote if
Right.
you didn't own property or had an education. That applied to white people, and white people have been oppressed since the beginning of this country too.
But those white people are going to be billionaires one day. We talked about this earlier.
Exactly.
One of these days, and they
One
don't
of these
want
days.
just temporarily embarrassed billionaires, right? So anyway, what do you think? I guess you wrote the second one. What do you?
Yeah, so I I watched a couple of your videos and saw a bunch of stuff on there, and obviously you touched on a lot of topics. couple of them being Project 2025 was one that I saw recently. And Jordan, I know you put out a video on that a while back, but I don't think we've really talked about it recently.
We haven't.
And I feel like, as much as I don't want to acknowledge it, because I think it's like absolutely in like the most ridiculous thing, but it's very insidious in actuality.
It is.
It probably deserves a little bit more of our time.
And you went to college because you wanted to write policy for the Heritage Foundation. I'm not sure if that made it in earlier in the podcast or if that was before when we were talking. But yeah, you went to college because you wanted to write policy for the Heritage Foundation, which is insane to me. That somebody at one point was like, this is the career path I want to take.
I want to be a part of writing Project 2025 and oppressing hundreds of millions of Americans.
So at some point, you believed in the mission of the Heritage Foundation, obviously enough to take out loans to try to perpetuate that mission. What is your perspective now that you've kind of come full circle on that?
Well, I will tell you, I've known about the mandate for leadership for many years. Like, this is not the first time the Heritage Foundation, every time...
been doing this since Reagan.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Been doing it since Reagan. Project 2025 is a whole new animal, but it actually follows along a very insidious underbelly in conservatism. Now, a lot of people don't dive this deep into conservatism, like it's really in the weeds, and it is the idea to completely dismantle the federal government, because there are a lot of places in this country, a lot of states in this country, who still have this idea that they can do things differently. So I'm trying not to say the word secession, and bring back the idea that I can't tell you, from the Charlie Daniels band to a T-shirt at a Piggly Wiggly in Kentucky, the South's going to rise again. The South's going to do it again.
Oh my God, I know.
Yep.
I went to college down there.
Yep. So this idea that the conservatism is going to be able to dismantle the federal government and states are going to be able to do whatever they want is alive and well in the conservative community. Now, I will tell you again, you have to do a deep dive, and a lot of conservatives never make this dive. So if you bring this up to them, the idea will likely be foreign to them. But what Project 2025...
Texas right now just had a petition to get secession back on the ballot. Like, that's going to do something. I mean, you can't legally secede according to the federal government.
Right.
Even
though Texas is special.
Texas always thinks they're special. They are special. They are very, very special.
But the
fun fact about Texas, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, go
Texas has the most Dairy Queens, but Minnesota has the most Dairy Queens per capita in the United States.
Interesting.
True story.
Fun fact
about Texas. I don't know.
Also, Minnesota has the biggest state fair, but Texas also has the biggest state fair.
Right.
But Minnesota's state fair is biggest per day attendance, where Texas just has their state fair go on for
things big,
for months at a time.
Beating Texas. It's the goal of every state to beat Texas. But I'll tell you the most. I've read Project 2025, and I did make a commitment on my TikTok. And for various personal reasons, I haven't finished this. I have a video ready on what I believe is the most insidious part of Project 2025, and that's Pillar 2 in this whole conservative LinkedIn, because the Heritage Foundation and the rest of these organizations who are putting this together are creating a legitimate army of sycophants that they can use and that they can place. I mean, there's about 720 cabinet positions that a president probably has an actual hand in appointing. Like at least it's been brought up to them. Now somebody else is probably pulling the strings and has this person in line long beforehand.
Right, but they sign off on it in the end, in theory.
There's another 4,000 to 9,000 that they never have a hand in. and what this conservative LinkedIn is doing is ideologically screening people for these positions. That way, they get somebody in that on day one is ready to reinstate Schedule F, which is basically a way for the executive branch to get around the 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 government's union or government employees union and fire people on the spot. And the entire basis for firing and replacing these people is ideological. It's not work
Mm-hmm.
performance. Now, of course, it's
Right.
under the guise of work performance, but it's an
Mm-hmm.
ideological transition for the United States federal government. And with the entire intent of neutering just about every regulatory agency that the executive branch has, has control over, and doing that will wreak havoc on the United States. One, the United States economy has to have stability. Without
Mm-hmm.
stability, we have wild fluctuations. We have a lot of volatility in the stock market. The rest of the world ends up seeing a lot of volatility. When they institute this and they start deregulating effectively everything, because that's the ultimate goal, is to
Mm-hmm.
deregulate, because our oligarchs don't like regulation. They don't like being told what they can and can't do. They just want to do whatever's going to make them the most money. Well,
Right.
we're they're the Heritage Foundation and the rest of these organizations are trying to build a federal government where businesses have carte blanche to do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want to do it. And I mean, you're this whole um, uh, independent legislature theory. Forgive me, it just wasn't coming.
Mm-hmm.
All of that has to do with giving state legislatures the ability to do whatever they want. And
Mm-hmm.
part of the conservative agenda from before I even got involved was to stack state legislatures with Republicans, because the whole goal has been to use the states and the at least 34 state legislatures to get a constitutional convention called so that they
Mm-hmm.
can get a balanced budget amendment passed. And now, at a balanced budget point, there are no more social programs. The idea is to eliminate social programs, because the more people are dependent on the federal government, or what they'll
Mm-hmm.
say is replacing God with government, the more instead of the community, and it actually says that in Project 2025, I believe in the opening forward. But it's this idea that we're replacing community with government, which I don't think they understand that there are about there are over 3,000 zip codes alone in the United States. We have some diversity in what you would call community,
Right.
but the idea is that social programs are intruding on what the community and what the church should do. So if we get rid of social programs, people will be more inclined to fall back on their own local communities, which in we're talking about rich white communities
Mm-hmm.
helping out the poor, which you
Yeah.
know,
The benevolence that they always
yeah,
bestow upon us peasants, right?
right, exactly. And but
I
the idea
I
is to
I
dismantle
do
that.
have just a caveat on that. I don't think that a balanced budget and social programs are mutually exclusive. Because like I mean, a lot of states have a balanced budget amendment. Minnesota is one of them, and Minnesota has uh more social programs than I'd say your average United States state. I think that it's there is you can balance a budget by increasing taxes, which they obviously don't want to do, but that is one way to balance a budget, and then just not spending it on departments that can't account for billions of dollars
Yeah,
of
like a
a
trillion
department you
dollar
used to
defense
work
budget,
for.
right? Well, and here's the thing, though, and this is a big issue with the difference between the federal government and the states. The states
Hmm.
can't operate in a deficit, but the United States government can.
But I
So,
mean, states operate in a deficit all the time.
well, they don't operate in the deficit like we're talking. Yes, California has a $34 billion deficit, but the
Right.
United States government can print its own money.
Yeah, I
California
see what you're saying.
cannot print its own money. Yeah,
Yep.
so that's
hmm
the distinction that I want to make. Well, um, the the national debt, and I used to rail against the national debt again. The
hmm
national debt I never looked at as an investment in the United States.
Right.
I've always looked at it as at some point we're going to have to pay this bill because we owe China $34 trillion,
Yeah, but it's
which
not
is
like our
not
credit
true.
card.
Right, exactly. It's not. But if you know, I mean, Kevin McCarthy just used the credit card analogy 6 8 months ago. So people
hmm
are still buying this whole the United States as a credit card. They're
Because
borrowing
they
money
don't
from
understand
China.
how fiat currency works, and they don't understand how the national debt works,
Exactly.
and
But
they
that
don't
national
understand that
debt,
nobody's ever going to want us to call in that debt, because if
right?
they did call in that debt, their money would be
Yeah, you
worthless.
bankrupt every pension in the country,
hmm
and that's the tip of the iceberg. But at the same time, that deficit spending that we're able to do, and that national debt that we're able to collect, um, a lot of that money goes to state social programs. So
hmm
it backfills the gap that some of these states have, and people don't understand that if we end deficit spending at the federal government level, I don't even know what to say as to what it would do for the United States, for the people of the United States.
What it would do for
It,
the world, I
yeah, for
mean,
the world, yeah.
but
But getting rid of the earned income tax credit, I can't tell you how many conservatives I know who are flat broke and who every year rely on the refund that they get,
hmm
and again, use air quotes, that they get from the federal government. It's like, I'm sorry, you didn't pay in $3,000 to the federal government. You can't get back 11,000 and call it a refund. That's not a refund.
no, no.
That's the federal government giving you a hand, and it also doesn't mean you go out and
Well,
buy flat screen TVs with it. Now, but at the same time, we could not do that with a balanced budget amendment. It simply it wouldn't work. You'd have 40, 50 million people in this country um, who would be voting for something that would impact them in a way that would be catastrophic
mhm.
for a lot of families. I mean,
Well, and that is honestly one of the things that I think it always baffles me, and I understand that it's coming from pure ignorance. But so
yeah,
many conservatives who rail against social programs. I mean, if we got rid of social programs today, the people who would be most effective would be conservatives, poor white Americans. Because I mean, if you're just looking on a strictly numbers basis, the people who rely the most heavily on the social programs in this country are poor white people,
in
and poor
Republican
white people are
states.
overwhelmingly conservative,
Yeah.
and rural people specifically, and they receive the most in welfare and social benefits. And hey, I live in rural America too, and again, even though Minnesota is a bright blue state, it's like any bright blue state. We've got metro populations that are surrounded by bright red counties, and I'm in one of those. And you see the people who it's like, you get a government check every fucking month for your disability or whatever it is, and your housing assistance, and it's always different because it's them. But they don't realize it's like all the things that you vote against, you're voting against yourself. And there's a lot of people, obviously, a lot of minority communities that tend to vote more liberally would be really dramatically affected too. But the liberal elite or whatever that they rail against, it's not going to affect those people. It's not going to. Those are the people who you're like, oh, I go to work every day to pay your welfare checks. Like, the fuck you do. Like, again, you were saying you're getting $11,000
Yeah.
back and you pay $3,000 in federal income tax, and it's maddening to try to explain. It's like, if you are so against it, why are you collecting it? How is it going to affect your life if you couldn't get this money every month?
Yeah.
And it's something I think most of us, especially that live in rural America or conservative areas, you see it a lot, because these areas are depressed, and you can't live in a place that has no place to work, that pays $7.25 an hour, is $10 an hour, and you're one of the high paid jobs in the area type of thing.
Well, that
Um,
actually that goes back to one of the statements you made originally, or that we were talking about originally. Not a statement you made. I don't want to put words in your
mhm.
mouth. About that whole, well, just move to where there are better jobs. It's like,
Yeah.
do you understand the family structure that's required to take care of three kids when daycare is
Mhm.
$800 to $1,000 a month for those three
Yeah.
children? Like, yeah, there's
Mhm.
no just pick up and move. I
No.
mean that
Well,
it
do you
doesn't work
understand how
like
much
that.
it costs to move? You need a car, you need insurance, you need gas,
Well,
you need a couple months rent while you
yeah,
find
yeah,
that new
exactly.
fucking job. You
If
need
you
a
can
down
find a place to
payment or
rent.
a security deposit and first and last months, it's like
Try to
it's
find a place
insane.
to
And
rent right now with BlackRock buying up all the rental
oh
properties.
my god, I know.
They bought a not, I won't say a subsidiary, but a company that was funded by BlackRock bought the last house that I lived in. Basically, sent me a notice. My landlord didn't even contact me. I was paying $850 a month because the house was in pretty bad shape from the last renters. So I was
Mhm.
fixing it, and paying a discount on rent in order to do that.
Right.
Well, I got a letter in the mail October of 2021, that basically said, "Hey, we bought your house. Your rent's going up $520 a month. You can either pay it or get out by November 13th."
Damn.
That was it. That was the whole deal. My landlord sold it to what amounts to a hedge fund, and they told me to
Mhm.
get out. And well, I mean, I left because I'm not paying $1,300 a month for, almost $1,400 a month for the POS that I was living in. But they came
Mhm.
in, gutted the entire interior, redid the whole thing. They did leave one of the shelves, the in-wall shelves that I built, so I was a little happy about that. I was like, "Huh,
Mhm.
appreciate that." But the house sat empty for over a year because nobody in that area could afford that rent. But
Yep.
I mean, how many
And they
people?
don't
Yeah,
mind that it sits empty because
nope.
that keeps the and that's the thing is in a normal capitalism if we had true capitalism, that house sitting empty would mean that they would lower the rent price until
Right,
somebody inhabited it because that's how supply and demand and the invisible hand works.
right.
But because they can own enough to control the supply, they don't have to lower it. And it's like
No.
we can take the loss on this one sitting empty because what we're able to raise by keeping that supply down, what we're able to charge for everything else, and what that property is appreciating in value on something they're paying next to no interest or probably no interest if they paid cash for it on um, just makes it so they don't have to operate in a free market scenario. They
Well, and they
control the
No,
can
they
market.
don't.
they
Yeah.
can write off the loss of like
That-
having to own the
Yep.
property
Yeah, that
as
too.
a negative on their profits. So they
Yep.
literally helps them on their bottom line when they end up having to pay some sort of federal tax,
Mm-hmm.
or at least make the calculation to make the
Yeah.
payment of $0
Yeah.
um,
And
to the
this
government.
we're talking about a 3 bedroom, 2 bath in a not great area that was 1,000 square feet at the absolute max. I think it was like 980 or something like that. Um,
3 bedrooms and 1,000 square feet and two
yeah.
baths. Damn.
Well,
Did you have a kitchen?
the master bathroom or the master bedroom had a bathroom that was about this big, but because it had a tub in it, it's 2 baths. All right, but literally, you couldn't have two people in that bathroom; it wouldn't have worked. You couldn't turn
Yeah.
around or brush your teeth, but it classified as two. But the thing is that house maybe was worth $110,000, and to charge $1,400 of rent, that's a $225,000 mortgage
Mm-hmm.
for a house that just, I mean, it simply wasn't worth that. And yeah, you're right. They didn't care about the holding costs because not only can they write it off, they've got bottomless pockets.
Mm-hmm.
So, and nobody in that area, I mean, nobody in that area uh,
Mm-hmm.
could afford that house. I mean, it just, yeah, it just wasn't. I mean, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
going to work.
So we are kind of running near the end of our time here.
Yeah.
For the obviously we can I don't mind this conversation. I think we're talking about some really good stuff.
No.
I just kind of wanted to end it. What do you think? 2024 or
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think touching a little bit on whatever we run over all the time. Fuck it. People can pause and pick back up later, right?
Sure.
The both sides are not the same argument we hear a lot, especially from people in the middle. What's kind of your take on that? Because now you've sort of been on both sides, and I feel like it's a cop out a lot of the time on people who either don't want to educate themselves or I feel like they want their opinion to be considered and be part of the conversation, but don't actually want to go through the work of forming a valid opinion. But that's me, and I have a lot of hot takes, So, what what is your feelings on the both sides are the same, especially when it comes to things like climate change and the military? You were part of that. Super PACs, I can go either way on that one, but medical costs and just democracy in general, and how we could have a whole conversation about how much the Democratic Party sucks, but
Yeah, don't end with an easy question.
right, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. If I could sum it up, it has to do with we are in a legit ideological battle at the moment of
Mm-hmm.
what America is, and that's so you have conservatives who believe republicanism is or believes America is small government, individual responsibility to a certain extent, if you will, and free market capitalism. And you could take how many wild perspectives there are on all three of those, and the ignorance associated with people who believe what they believe, and then you have the other side, or the progressive side
Mm-hmm.
that wants to move America forward. That isn't, um, for lack of better words, chaining America to its past. So
Mm-hmm.
you have a group of people who have America chained to its past, and another group that sees America as a constantly evolving, um, you know, place. And that's the ideological struggle at the moment. Like, I want to see the United States move forward. I before had this idea of what America was,
Mm-hmm.
and I, I loved that idea, but that's just what it is. It's an idea. It's not real. It's not reality.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the people that I'm talking to that have us chained to our past have us chained to a past or chained to a past that doesn't exist and
Mm-hmm.
didn't exist. But you cannot tell them that it didn't exist and that it wasn't the sunshine and rainbows. And I love the when I'm talking to somebody about that is to use the time traveler, thought experiment. And that's, as white people, we have a million different areas of the United States that we could time travel to talk to. But I can get away with talking to Thomas Jefferson. Indeed, he couldn't.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
That's a good way to.
That's a
keep it
very good
simple.
way to talk.
yeah,
I've never even considered that, but I like
yeah.
that a lot.
But
Um,
that's the battle that we're in at the moment.
and I guess what the question I sort of was trying to poke at there, because at one point, and I again don't remember if this was before we started or not. You admitted to us that you voted for Gary Johnson, which props to not voting for Trump, but
Yeah,
you
but it
voted for
was
Gary
yeah.
Johnson.
It,
Uh,
and I know much
and
more about Gary Johnson now, and would never vote for him again. Let me make that
Yeah.
clear.
uh huh. But that's what a lot of third party people who vote third party go to, is both sides are the same. And look, tell me, I have a video out there about Hillary Clinton, and it's not a necessarily favorable one. Um, and I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about the Democratic Party, about Joe Biden, about Barack Obama. I can sit there and he's the modern, or Bill Clinton, all people who are shining stars in the Democratic Party. I have lots of criticisms about all of them. But I also know that the consequences of voting, I believe that the consequences of voting for one over the other, even Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump, or Hillary Clinton over third party, it outweighed the negatives and the criticisms that I had in the situation that we're in. Now, I hate the situation that we're in, and I'd like some different opportunities and options. But what do you have to say to that? Because you've been on both sides, and that's kind of what I was getting at, is how do you feel about the aspects of, and I'm not trying to lead your answer by saying, like the damaging aspects, but just the aspects of voting a Gary Johnson, of voting a Jill Stein, who I don't know if my video is posted yet today or not, but
2024 is a completely different animal. We are in a new paradigm right now. November 2023, and I said this in one of my TikToks, was the first time I've ever voted and did not vote for a single Republican. There is not a single Republican who would get my vote in 2024, period. Because what is happening to the Republican Party now and their devotion not only to Donald Trump, but to this militant arm of the Republican base is not only is it disgusting to me, but it's full of ideological inconsistencies too. Just from a purely intellectual standpoint, you can't be upset about Donald Trump being pulled from the ballot in different states when you preach about states' rights and states having the ability to do whatever they want. And not only that, you want to complain about the United States being a republic and not being a democracy. Well, Donald Trump was just bit by the republic aspect, which is the rule of law and the Constitution. So now all of a sudden we're a democracy and voters should have the right to vote for whoever they want to. There are so many ideological inconsistencies on the Republican side, to say nothing about the lunacy that they are putting up with, and the idea that Donald Trump can lie with impunity and you don't have a Republican except for maybe Chris Christie or
Mitt Romney,
Governor
Liz
Sununu
Cheney,
or Mitt Romney. Yeah, Liz Cheney, which I'm reading Liz Cheney's book. Well, I'm listening to it because I prefer audiobooks because I like to do other stuff.
Hell yeah.
Anyway, the fact of the matter is that the Republican Party is completely lost at this point. There is not a vote for a Republican that can be justified in 2024. And I will tell you all this: Donald Trump cannot, and I will die on this hill, cannot win a general election in the United States, and he won't ever again, because there are enough people in the United States, especially on the independent side. There's not a Democrat in this country who would vote for Donald Trump. I don't think there's a true independent in this country who not a right-wing anarchist that claims to be a libertarian, but a true independent in this country who would vote for Donald Trump. And there are at least 30% of the Republican Party who wouldn't vote for Donald Trump if he was the last candidate on earth. I would vote for a washing machine before I voted for Donald Trump. It simply wouldn't happen. He could be running against a Cocker Spaniel, and I would vote for the Cocker Spaniel all day.
How about a magic 8-ball? You just shake it on and
there we go. What
did you do about Iran?
Yeah. Check back later.
Well, we spent 4 years doing that, but
that has basically been our policy in the Middle East for a long time.
But no, there is 2024. There's no question in 2024. The Republican Party needs a real great reset. We need a great reset in the Republican Party, and
they need to implode. Which I mean, they're heading there. I do want to say I appreciate your optimism that there's no way Trump could ever win a general election. But in Minnesota, you can vote on both primaries, and I didn't do it, but I was like, I should go vote for Trump because there's no way he could win a general election. And then
you still don't want it to. You still don't want the possibility there,
right? But no, like this was back in 2016, and like we were all joking about it. Like even Jon Stewart, he announced his retirement, and then Donald Trump was running for president, and he's like, why? And and Barack Obama made the joke at, I think it was a White House Correspondents' Dinner, where he's like, you can say that I was the worst president or whatever, but at least I can say I was president. And like mic dropped to Donald Trump, and that aged not great.
And actually probably set Donald Trump on that course too.
Probably did, honestly.
Ego.
But like that still worries me because like I want to agree with you, and my logical, pragmatic brain says that you are right. And then I look at history and been like, well, Hitler was a thing, and now Donald Trump has been a thing, and we still have enough rabid people out there who and in a political system that is designed to favor people like that. I mean, our political system is set up to favor the minority
and name recognition.
And name recognition. Yeah, and that scares me, and is as unpopular and old as Joe Biden is now. I mean, to think what happens if Joe Biden dies in the middle of the campaign against Donald Trump, and now Kamala Harris, who is wildly unpopular too, is now not an incumbent. Like, you have a little bit of protection when you're an incumbent. It's really hard to lose if you're an incumbent in a decent economy. Like, you have to really
you have to try.
you have to try, or you have to have somebody sabotaging your Iran negotiations to lose as an incumbent. And
tip to Jimmy Carter
every time.
I just he's the only. I'm like, you have to suck as a president to not get reelected as an incumbent. But Jimmy Carter got done dirty. Biden is 463 years old next month, and he may not make it to the next election, and that would turn everything on end. He's not that popular as it is. The economy's doing good on paper, but the economy doesn't work for average people anymore, so most people don't feel like it's doing good to them. So even you can't rely on those economic numbers to secure that reelection.
Yeah, economic sentiment is at an all-time low,
right?
Even though the numbers show pretty good bounce back from a pretty bad 2023.
Right. No, and the economy is doing great by a statistical standpoint. It's just it doesn't work for the average American anymore.
Well, it didn't work for the average American before Trump, before Obama.
The good news, I'll tell you this: I have some conservative family members that I saw over the holidays, and two conservative men who have done pretty well for themselves, but are still ardent Republicans, not necessarily Trump supporters. I don't want to take it that far, but who are ardent conservatives. We're talking about how great the market did in 2023, especially here towards the end.
My 401k is up.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
They honestly gave
check mine.
the credit to Bidenomics. So they're and again, this goes back to 70% of the American electorate would rather vote for Joe Biden in a weekend at Bernie scenario with the Secret Service on either side of him than to vote for Donald Trump and to go backwards in this. And I think there's a lot of people who understand that even though Donald Trump is a Republican in name only, if you will, not a real rhino, but he's a rhino in the Ace Ventura 2 cents. But he's
in the pet detective sense.
Yeah, they know he's an idiot. People recognize that Donald Trump he gets by on the fact that he's a bully and he's a loudmouth. And the media eats that up because it's great for ratings. And the MAGA people, a lot of them, a lot of these people who are out here supporting Donald Trump are just so deep in it. Like at this point, they can't let it go. Like they, just to save face. But there's absolutely no way. And I would predict Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And Joe Biden you're absolutely right. Not only is he old, he's unpopular, and there are a lot of Democrats who wish he wouldn't run. But at the same time, we're talking Reagan and Mondale type of electoral victory for anybody who goes against Donald Trump in a general election. He might be able to take the Republican Party, and I said that back in August that he may still get the primary because 15% of the Republican Party are openly racist. 10% of the Republican Party, well, I say openly racist, or just completely ignorant to anything that doesn't have an R next to it. And you've got 10% of the Republican Party who will vote for anybody as long as they think they can win. As only they've got an R next to their name, they're party sycophants. So yeah, is it possible Donald Trump can get the primary win? Yeah, even as a convicted felon, he could probably
Mm-hmm.
still get it. But in a general election, Donald Trump will lose to just about anybody, even if Joe Biden decided not to run, or heaven forbid, because I wouldn't wish that on anybody, pulls an FDR,
Mm-hmm.
but in this case passes before the general
Yeah.
election. I still think Kamala Harris would get the vote before Donald Trump would, because I do believe that a majority of Americans understand how dangerous Donald Trump is. And not only that, they understand him to be the lying sack of orange shit that he is.
God, I appreciate your optimism, and I'm
And I'm
not sure I
normally a
share it because we
pragmatist.
got burned once before, man. Like
Yeah, but even
I
I
sat
didn't
there.
know Donald Trump
I
was
sat
that
there. I
bad.
said the same things. I said the same things you were
Mm.
saying now in 2016, and it didn't age well. And I'm
But
hoping that this episode ages much better than the shit I was saying in 2016 ages.
even though I refused to vote for Donald Trump,
Mm-hmm.
I still didn't realize he was as bad as he is back then.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I knew he was an ignorant blowhard. I got that part. I didn't know he was an out and out malignant narcissist who would try to destroy the foundation of American democracy just because he was butthurt because he lost an election. I did not realize he was that bad. Like, I knew he was
Mm-hmm.
bad. I didn't realize he was that bad. Now,
No.
Hillary Clinton knew he was that bad on the debate stage in
Mm-hmm.
October of 2016, when she said, Donald Trump is already preparing his excuse for why he lost.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, and that's just who Donald Trump is. But enough Americans see him for who he is. Even Republicans see him for who he is now a lot better than they did back then, because nobody paid attention to Donald Trump until probably what, June of 2016, because nobody
Right.
Yeah,
even
I
saw him as a
mean,
legit candidate by then.
I do think
Mm-hmm.
there's enough people who hate Joe Biden that like they might overlook some of those things because I think he's unfortunately just a very very unlikable candidate, especially in this moment.
Yeah, with the Palestine and Gaza stuff, I think is really gonna, especially with the younger
Well,
vote,
yeah,
not
it's
going
gonna
to
hurt him with
do.
the millennials and younger, and it's gonna help him with the pro-Israel conservatives.
Yeah,
Yeah, but they
but
also believe that Trump's pro-Israel. So
Yeah,
even then, all those people who are griping about his support for Israel and what's going on with Palestine, and the fact that the United States really, I mean, it is a no-win situation over there. It doesn't matter what your opinion is; it's still a
Mhm.
no-win situation. And it's always going to be a no-win situation, because we're fighting over religion, or we're talking
Mhm.
about a fight over religion. But when people go into their voting booths or at their voting stand with their paper ballots, and they look at that long and hard Trump Biden, I believe there are enough people who are going to put that aside and know that. And I believe this not only because I've studied politics, and I've
Mhm.
studied elections, and my degree in law and public policy is a bachelor's of science, not a bachelor's of arts. And we're talking about analyzing voting and analyzing voting trends, and how people do vote. I do believe that when even people who are on the fence, when they go into that booth, are going to understand that a vote for Biden for another year and a half or 2 years, I sincerely doubt it'll
right.
be four, is still better than a vote for Donald Trump. I do believe that fervently. Um, Even though Biden is, I mean, he is wildly unpopular, but the only reason that the Democrat Party, or Democratic Party, it's still a tick in me to call it
Mhm.
the Democrat Party and not the
Mhm.
Democratic Party.
Mhm.
So that's still burned in my brain. But in 2016, the Democratic Party ran Joe Biden because he was an old white guy. It's the only reason Joe
Mhm.
Biden,
Right.
an old white guy versus another old white guy, and they did that on purpose. And in 2024, it is still going to be, the difference between two old white guys.
Yep.
True.
If
We're
Donald Trump gets it, in this point, enough people realize that one of those old white guys is completely unhinged. So
Mhm.
you have you have a binary choice: old white guy versus old white guy. One old white guy is completely unhinged. One other old white guy isn't completely unhinged, and
Mhm.
that's the question. Completely
Yeah.
unhinged versus not completely unhinged. I'm going to go with the not completely unhinged.
Yeah, I guess I don't know that I
Have that
can.
much faith.
I don't. It's not only that. It's just I don't know how well. I think it'll all come down to some of the debates that'll be coming along this year between directly Biden and Trump.
Trump won't step on a
Trump,
debate stage. He
well, if
won't.
he does, Trump will win every debate because he doesn't care about lying and he doesn't care
Yeah.
about being a bully on stage.
And
He'll just
I
look
mean,
like he's bullying an old man.
he won't debate. I mean, you're already seeing it with the primary. He's refusing to debate.
The
He
primary,
he did it a lot in the general last year. I mean, I think he only stepped on the debate stage, what was it, twice? I don't remember, but
There's
anyway,
only like 3 usually.
I don't know. He didn't show up to one. He chose not to show up to at least one. From my recollection. Now, I drink a lot, so that couldn't be the best. But we're coming up on an hour 40 here, which is 40-ish minutes longer than we normally go. But we've absolutely loved this conversation. Would love to have you back again in the future.
You have my
and
number, man. You call me anytime. I'd love to come back on with you.
Absolutely,
I'm really
we
looking
will.
forward to your Product 2025 analysis.
Yeah, maybe we should do something on that at some point. But and I should have done this at the beginning, but your shout out to yourself, your shameless plugs. Where can we find you on all the socials? Because you got a TikTok, you got a YouTube. I don't know what else you got going on out there, but
just rebranded. It's I'm working on something called Reformed with James Killen. So and of course Reformed being a Reformed conservative,
mhm.
and the idea that we can further the United States, that there are reforms that we need to do. So
Yeah.
not only toss back to my past and where I am now, but where we can go in the future. So Reformed with James Killen or Reformed JK is the handles that I'm using.
Reformed, just kidding.
Hey, at least it's memorable.
All right, so that's the handles on TikTok. That's the handles on YouTube. All right, Reformed JK or Reformed James Killen. That's James as you would always spell James, and Killen Killen. Thank you so much again for being on with us. Like I said, I was a big fan when I was still a nobody on TikTok and everything, and I fanboyed a little bit when you followed me back, and I'm happy that
dude, I fanboyed when I saw your comment the other day.
So I'm super happy that you were willing to come out and be on here with us, and we're definitely going to have you back because we skipped a ton of this outline we had today. I think there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, there's so much more to dig into deeper, and obviously we'd love to get your takes on the 2024 election as
it unfolds. Yeah, so
If
once
I got
again,
anything
thanks.
scheduled, I'll change my schedule around to come.
All right,
So,
sounds great. We appreciate it. Absolutely, everybody, go follow him. James Killen, Reformed James Killen or Reformed JK on YouTube and TikTok, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks for watching, listening. We love y'all.
I appreciate y'all.